Have you ever looked in the mirror and asked yourself that haunting question? Why do I keep letting the same people hurt me over and over again? Why do I keep dancing this painful dance, even though I know the steps will lead me right back to heartbreak? You're not alone. Every single person in this room has felt that deep ache of betrayal, that moment when someone you trusted completely shatters your world. And yet, like moths to a flame, we find ourselves drawn back to those who hurt us most. Or worse, we seek out new relationships that follow the exact same pattern. I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Think about that person who broke your trust so deeply that you thought you'd never recover. Feel that familiar tightness in your chest, that knot in your stomach. Now hold on to that feeling, because today we're going to understand why you chose them, why you might still be choosing them, and most importantly, how to break free from the cycle that's keeping you trapped in pain. You see, we're all carrying invisible wounds, wounds that were carved into our hearts long before we even understood what pain was. These wounds shape our choices in ways we can't even see. They whisper to us in the dark, telling us we're not worthy of real love, that pain is all we deserve, that this is as good as it gets. But I'm here to tell you something that might shake you to your core. You're not choosing these people because there's something wrong with you. You're choosing them because there's something within you that's trying to heal. Think about a child who grows up in a home where love is conditional, where they have to earn every scrap of affection through perfect behavior, through being exactly who their parents want them to be. What lesson does that child learn? They learn that love is something you have to chase, something you have to prove yourself worthy of receiving. And so that child grows up and they meet someone who makes them work for love, who keeps them guessing, who gives them just enough warmth to keep them hoping, but never enough to feel secure. And it feels familiar. It feels right. Not because it is right, but because it matches the blueprint of love that was etched into their soul when they were too young to know any different. Or perhaps you grew up in chaos, where love was intense but unstable, where the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones you needed protection from, and now you find yourself drawn to passionate, volatile relationships that swing between ecstasy and agony, because somewhere deep inside, your heart believes that drama equals depth, that pain equals passion. When was the last time you felt truly safe in a relationship? Not just physically safe, but emotionally safe. Safe enough to be completely yourself, to show all your flaws and fears without wondering if they'll be used against you later. If you're struggling to remember such a time, you're not alone. Because here's the brutal truth we need to face. Many of us don't choose people who hurt us because we enjoy pain. We choose them because they feel safe in their familiarity. The devil you know feels less frightening than the unknown territory of healthy love. But there's something even deeper at play here. Something that might sound strange at first. We often choose people who hurt us because unconsciously we're trying to heal old wounds. It's as if our psyche believes that if we can just make this person love us right, if we can just fix this relationship, we'll somehow heal all the hurt from our past. Think about it like this. Imagine you broke your arm as a child and it never healed properly. Now, every time you try to lift something, you feel that old, but instead of getting it properly treated, you keep trying to lift heavier and heavier things, believing that if you can just manage to lift enough weight, it will prove your arm is fine. That's what we do with emotional wounds. We keep testing them against the very things that hurt us, hoping that this time will prove we're healed. I want you to take another moment right now. Think about your current relationships, not just romantic ones, but friendships, family relationships, even work relationships. How many of them follow patterns that feel painfully familiar? How many times have you said, I can't believe this is happening again? These patterns aren't coincidences. They're not bad luck. They're not even really about the other person. They're about the stories we tell ourselves about what we deserve, about what love looks like, about what we need to do to be worthy of care and respect. And the most painful part, we often reject people who could actually love us properly because their love feels wrong. It feels too easy, too secure, too unconditional. We mistake drama for passion, struggle for depth, and pain for love. We've gotten so used to earning love through suffering that when someone offers it freely, we don't trust it. We might even push it away. But I want you to hear this, really hear this. The love that hurts isn't love at all. It's a reflection of all the ways we were taught that we weren't enough. It's the echo of every time we were told we had to be different, better, more to be worthy of love. It's the shadow of every relationship where we learned that love and pain were two sides of the same coin. What if I told you that the very thing you're seeking, that deep, fulfilling love, might be something you're actively running from? What if the reason you keep choosing people who hurt you is because deep down you're terrified of what it might mean to be truly loved? When we built our entire understanding of love around pain, actual healthy love can feel terrifying. It can feel boring. It can feel like something must be wrong because it doesn't hurt. We become emotional adrenaline junkies, mistaking the highs and lows of toxic relationships for passion and depth. But real love doesn't leave you questioning your worth. Real love doesn't require you to make yourself smaller or bigger or different. Real love doesn't need you to prove yourself worthy of it every single day. Real love is like breathing. It should feel natural, sustaining, life-giving, not like drowning, not like gasping for air. You know what's fascinating about human beings? Our incredible ability to rationalize our own pain. We're masters at explaining away the behaviors that hurt us. He's just stressed from work. She didn't mean it that way. Things will be different this time. At least they're not as bad as my ex. We become lawyers defending the very people who are causing us pain, presenting evidence for why we should stay, why we should keep trying, why we should give them one more chance. But let me ask you something. Would you advise your best friend to stay in a relationship that makes them feel the way yours does? Would you tell your child that it's okay for someone to treat them the way you're being treated? If the answer is no, then why are you telling yourself it's okay? We need to talk about something that might make you uncomfortable. The payoff. Yes, you heard me right. There's always a payoff in staying in relationships that hurt us. Now, before you reject this idea, stay with me for a moment. Sometimes the payoff is getting to play the role of the martyr, the one who sacrifices everything for love. Sometimes it's avoiding the terror of being truly seen, truly known, because as long as we're focused on the other person's issues, we don't have to face our own. Sometimes it's the comfort of familiar pain over the uncertainty of potential happiness. Think about that for a moment. What's your payoff? What are you getting from staying in situations that hurt you? Because until you're honest about what you're getting out of these patterns, you'll keep repeating them just with different faces and different names. Here's a truth that might shake you. You're not a victim of your relationships. You're a creator of them. Every time you accept behavior, that diminishes you. Every time you make excuses for someone who hurts you, every time you choose to stay when your heart is screaming at you to leave, you're actively participating in creating your reality. Now, I'm not saying this to blame you. I'm saying this to empower you. Because once you understand that you're creating your relationship patterns, you can begin to create different ones. We need to understand something crucial. The way people treat us is often a direct reflection of how we treat ourselves. If you don't believe you deserve respect, you'll find yourself surrounded by people who disrespect. If you don't believe you're worthy of loyalty, you'll attract people who betray you. If you don't believe you deserve consistency, you'll end up with people who are chaotic and unreliable. Take a moment right now and think about your internal dialogue. What do you say to yourself when you look in the mirror? What do you tell yourself when you make a mistake? How do you talk to yourself when things go wrong? Because I promise you, the way you speak to yourself is setting the standard for how others will speak to you. Let's do something right now. I want you to think about the last time someone hurt you deeply. Now, instead of focusing on what they did, I want you to focus on what you did in response. Did you set a boundary? Did you express your hurt? Did you walk away? Or did you swallow your pain, make excuses, try harder to please them? Your response to being hurt tells you everything about what you believe you deserve. And here's the thing about beliefs. They're not facts. They're stories we've been told and stories we've told ourselves, and stories can be rewritten. But let me tell you why this is so challenging. We're literally addicted to our emotional patterns. When we experience something that matches our familiar pattern of love and pain, our brains release the same chemicals as they would for any other addiction. We get a hit of adrenaline from the drama, cortisol from the stress, dopamine from the makeups after fights. This is why leaving toxic relationships can feel physically painful. This is why we go back even when we know better. This is why we might feel bored or anxious in healthy relationships. We're literally going through withdrawal from our emotional addiction. Think about your relationship patterns like a dance you've learned. You know all the steps by heart. You know exactly when to turn, when to dip, when to pull away, when to come closer. Even if the music is hurting you, even if your partner is stepping on your toes, you keep dancing because at least you know the steps. Starting a new dance feels awkward, uncomfortable, uncertain. But here's what nobody tells you about breaking these patterns, because the discomfort you feel when trying to create healthy relationships isn't a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that you're growing. It's like trying to write with your non-dominant hand. At first, it feels awkward, unnatural, wrong. But with practice, it becomes possible, and eventually it becomes natural. I want you to understand something profound. The people who hurt us are often our greatest teachers, not because they meant to teach us anything, but because they show us exactly where we need to heal. Every person who has hurt you has highlighted a wound that needs attention, a boundary that needs to be set, a part of yourself that needs to be loved more fully. When someone shows you through their actions that they're capable of hurting you repeatedly, they're actually showing you something much deeper. They're showing you where you need to love yourself more. Because when you truly love yourself, you don't keep giving chances to people who have proven they'll make. Think about it this way. If you had a precious jewel, something irreplaceable and valuable, would you keep handing it to someone who has dropped it before? Would you trust them with it again and again, hoping that this time they won't let it fall? Your heart is that jewel. Your trust is that precious. Your love is that valuable. And here's where many of us get stuck. We think that loving ourselves means we have to be perfect first. We think we have to earn self-love through achievement, through being better, through fixing all our flaws. But that's exactly backward. Self-love isn't something you earn. It's something you learn to access, something you allow yourself to feel, something you practice until it becomes your natural state. And yes, I said practice, because self-love isn't a destination you reach one day and then live happily ever after. It's a choice you make every single day, in small moments and big ones. It's choosing yourself when someone else isn't. It's setting boundaries, even when you're afraid. It's walking away from situations that diminish you, even when walking away feels like tearing yourself in half. Let me share something powerful with you. Most important relationship you'll ever have isn't with a romantic partner, a friend, or even a family member. It's the relationship you have with yourself. Because every other relationship in your life is filtered through that one. Think of your self-relationship like a pair of glasses. If those glasses are scratched with self-doubt and smudged with unworthiness, everything you see will look distorted. Every relationship you look at will be clouded by those same marks. But if you clean those glasses, if you learn to see yourself clearly and lovingly, suddenly everything else comes into focus too. What if the people who hurt you weren't your problem to fix? What if their behavior had nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their own unhealed wounds? What if you could look at them with compassion from a distance without feeling responsible for their healing? Hurt people hurt people. The person who betrayed your trust was probably betrayed themselves. The person who can't love you consistently probably never experienced consistent love. The person who tries to control you is probably terrified of their own lack of control. Understanding this doesn't mean you have to stay and take the hurt. It doesn't mean you have to be their healing journey. It means you can step back and say, I see your pain, but I won't let it become mine anymore. Let's talk about something that might feel uncomfortable. The role of hope in toxic relationships. Hope can be beautiful, but it can also be dangerous. Hope is what keeps us hanging on when we should let go. Hope is what makes us see potential instead of reality. Hope is what has us investing in who someone could be rather than accepting who they are. You know that feeling when someone who's hurt you repeatedly suddenly shows a glimpse of change. That tiny moment when they're kind or understanding or seem to really get it, that moment is like a drop of water in the desert. And when you're thirsty enough, a single drop can feel like an ocean. Change isn't a moment. Change isn't a promise. Change isn't words. Change is insistent action over time. Change is a choice made again and again and again, even when it's difficult, even when it's uncomfortable, even when no one is watching. How many times have you gone back to someone who hurt you because they promised to change? How many times have you believed that this time would be different? How many times have you invested in potential rather than reality? Now imagine if you took all that hope, all that energy, all that belief in someone else's potential and invested it in yourself instead. Imagine if you became as committed to your own growth as you are to helping others. Imagine if you believed in yourself as much as you believe in the possibility of someone else changing. Let's talk about boundaries. Not just the kind of boundaries where you tell someone what they can't do to you, but the kind of boundaries that start with what you won't do to yourself anymore. Because the strongest boundaries aren't walls we build against others. They're standards we set for ourselves. What if you made a promise to yourself right now? A promise that you won't abandon yourself anymore, no matter how much someone else wants you to. A promise that you won't ignore your intuition anymore, no matter how convincing someone else's excuses are. A promise that you won't shrink yourself anymore, no matter how uncomfortable your light makes others feel. Think about the last time your gut told you something was wrong, but your heart convinced you to stay anyway. Your intuition isn't just some vague feeling. It's the accumulation of every lesson you've ever learned, speaking to you in the language of feeling. When you ignore it, you're ignoring your own wisdom. Sometimes it looks like making people angry. Sometimes it looks like disappointing others. Sometimes it looks like being called selfish or difficult or too sensitive. Because when you start to heal, you start to change the dance. And not everyone is going to like your new steps. Let me tell you something about that discomfort. It's a sign you're growing. It's a sign you're finally taking up the space you deserve. It's a sign you're no longer willing to make yourself small to make others comfortable. You see, the people who have been benefiting from your old patterns, your people-pleasing, your self-doubt, your need for approval, they might not celebrate your growth. They might actually try to convince you that you're the one who's wrong for changing. They might try to guilt you back into your old patterns. This is where most people get stuck. They start to grow, they start to change, they start to set boundaries, and then the pushback comes. And in that moment of resistance, they question everything. Maybe I am being too harsh. Maybe I should be more understanding. Maybe I'm expecting too much. If someone's upset about you taking care of yourself, they were probably benefiting from you neglecting yourself. If someone is angry about your boundaries, they were probably taking advantage of your lack of them. When they share something powerful with you, the moment you truly start to heal, to value yourself, to set boundaries, that's when you'll find out who really loves you and who just loved what you could do for them. And yes, this revelation might hurt. You might lose people. You might have to let go of relationships you thought would last forever. But here's what's beautiful about that losses. It makes room for what's meant for you. It creates space for relationships that match your worth, that mirror your growth, that celebrate your strength instead of exploiting your wounds. Think about a garden. Sometimes for the healthy plants to thrive, you have to pull out the weeds. Those weeds might have been there so long that the garden looks empty without them at first. But that emptiness is not a void, it's space for new growth, space for healthy relationships, space for the life you actually want, not just the one you've gotten used to. I want you to try something with me right now. Close your eyes and imagine yourself as a child. See that little version of you, innocent, hopeful, full of dreams. What would you say to that child? Would you tell them they need to earn love? Would you tell them they deserve to be hurt? Would you tell them to keep trying with people who don't value them? Of course not. You'd want to protect that child. You'd want to wrap them in love and tell them they're precious exactly as they are. So why do we struggle to offer that same protection and love to ourselves now? You see, inside each of us, that child still exists. And every time we choose people who hurt us, every time we stay in situations that harm us, we're not just hurting our adult selves. we're hurting that inner child who's still waiting to be loved properly. Let's talk about something real. The fear of being alone. Because let's be honest, that's often what keeps us in hurtful relationships, isn't it? We tell ourselves that any connection is better than no connection, that familiar pain is better than unknown possibilities, that maybe this is as good as it gets. Being alone and being lonely are two very different things. You can be surrounded by people and feel completely lonely if those people don't truly see you, don't truly value you, don't truly love you for who you are. And sometimes being alone is exactly what we need to hear our own voice again. Because in the chaos of toxic relationships, in the constant drama of emotional abuse, in the endless cycle of trying to prove our worth, we often lose touch with who we really are. Think about the last time you were truly alone. Not lonely, not waiting for someone to call or text, but genuinely at peace in your own company. Can't remember. That's exactly where we need to start. Because here's the truth. That might change everything. The reason we keep choosing people who hurt us is often because we're afraid to choose ourselves. We're afraid to sit with ourselves. We're afraid to face the silence and discover who we are without the distraction of another person's chaos. Let me share something powerful with you. The ability to be alone, truly alone, without feeling lonely is one of the greatest forms of emotional freedom you can achieve. Because when you're no longer afraid of solitude, you stop accepting connections that hurt you just to avoid being alone. Now let's talk about patterns. You know that moment when you realize you're in the same situation with a different person? That's not bad luck. That's not coincidence. That's your unhealed wounds choosing your relationships for you. Think about it like this. If you have a broken arm and it hasn't healed properly, you'll favor that arm in everything you do. You'll adapt your movements, change your habits, protect it without even thinking about it. Our emotional wounds work the same way. We adapt our entire lives around them, often without even realizing it. But here's the beautiful thing about patterns, son. Once you can see them, you can change them. Once you understand why you keep choosing what hurts you, you can begin to choose differently. What would your life look like if you loved yourself as completely as you've tried to love others? What would change if you directed all that care, all that attention, all that forgiveness toward yourself? The way we love others is often a reflection of how we wish someone would love us. The patience we show others is the patience we crave. The understanding we offer is the understanding we need. The forgiveness we give is the forgiveness we're seeking. So what if we turn that love inward? What if we became for ourselves what we've been seeking from others? What if we stopped outsourcing our happiness, our worth, our validation to people who have proven they can't be trusted with it? You don't need someone else to complete you. You don't need someone else to validate your worth. You don't need someone else to give your life meaning. You are already complete. You're already worthy. Your life already has meaning. And yes, I know that might sound like something from a greeting card, but I want you to really sit with that idea because most of us don't actually believe it. We say we do, but our actions tell a different story. Think about your relationships like a mirror. They reflect back to you what you believe about yourself, what you think you deserve, what you're willing to accept. If you keep seeing the same painful reflection, it's not the mirror that needs to change. It's the beliefs you're bringing to it. Let's talk about forgiveness. Not forgiving others, though that's important too, but forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for staying too long. Forgiving yourself for ignoring the red flags. Forgiving yourself for believing the lies. Forgiving yourself for all the times you chose someone else's happiness over your own. Until you forgive yourself, you keep punishing yourself. And one of the ways we punish ourselves is by choosing people who hurt us, who confirm our worst fears about ourselves, who treat us the way we think we deserve to be treated. But what if you decided right now that you've punished yourself enough? What if you decided that from this moment forward, you're going to treat yourself with the same compassion you so freely give to others? What if you decided that your heart is too precious to keep giving it to people who don't know its value? You know what's incredible about the human spirit? Its ability to heal, to grow, to transform. No matter how many times you've been hurt, no matter how many wrong choices you've made, no matter how long you've been stuck in painful patterns, you can change your story. You can write a new ending. Think about water for a moment. When water meets an obstacle, it doesn't stop flowing. It doesn't break down and give up. It finds a new path. It creates new channels. It transforms its journey. That's what you're capable of too. You're not meant to stay stuck in the same painful patterns. You're meant to flow toward what nourishes you, what helps you grow, what makes you feel alive. Let me share something powerful with you. Every time you choose yourself, you create a new neural pathway in your brain. Every time you set a boundary, you strengthen your self-worth. Every time you walk away from what hurts you, you teach your heart that it deserves. But here's what nobody tells you about transformation. It's not always beautiful. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it feels like you're falling apart. But what if falling apart isn't the end of your story? What if it's just the beginning? Think about a butterfly. Before it spreads its wings, it has to completely dissolve inside its cocoon. It has to let go of everything it was before it can become what it's meant to be. Your transformation might feel like that sometimes. Like you're dissolving. Like nothing makes sense. Like you don't even know who you are anymore. But that confusion, that uncertainty, that feeling of being lost, it's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're finally doing something right. It's a sign that you're growing beyond the limitations of your old patterns. What would you do if you weren't afraid of being alone? What choices would you make if you truly believed in your worth? What boundaries would you set if you knew you deserved them? The people who are meant to be in your life won't need you to constantly prove your worth to them. They won't need you to shrink yourself to make them comfortable. They won't need you to accept less than you deserve to keep them around. Think about that for a moment. Think about how much energy you've spent trying to prove your worth to people who are never going to value you properly. Think about how exhausting it's been trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Now imagine redirecting all that energy towards your own growth, your own healing, your own joy. Imagine what could happen if you stopped trying to convince people to love you and started showing yourself what real love looks like. You see, the most powerful moment in your life isn't when someone else finally loves you the way you want to be loved. It's when you finally begin to love yourself that way. When you finally understand that you are not a project to be fixed, not a problem to be solved, not a person who needs to earn the right to be loved. Let me tell you something that might shake your world. The right people will love you without you having to earn it. The right people will respect your boundaries without you having to fight for them. The right people will value your heart without you having to prove its worth. But here's the catch. You won't recognize these people. You won't let them into your life. You won't believe their love is real until you first learn to give these things to yourself. Think about a house for a moment. If your foundation is shaky, it doesn't matter how beautiful the furniture is, how expensive the decorations are, how many people you invite in, that house will always feel unstable. Your relationship with yourself is the foundation. Everything else, every other relationship, every connection, every interaction is built on that foundation. What are you ready to stop accepting? What patterns are you ready to break? What parts of yourself are you ready to reclaim? You weren't born believing you deserve less. You weren't born afraid of being alone. You weren't born accepting crumbs of affection and calling it love. These are things you learned. And anything that can be learned can be unlearned. Right now in this moment, you have a choice. You can keep dancing the same old dance, keep accepting the same old pain, keep believing the same old lies about your worth, or you can choose something different. You can choose to trust that you deserve more. You can choose to believe that real love doesn't hurt. You can choose to finally put yourself first. Every time you've been hurt, every time you've been betrayed, every time you've been let down, it wasn't because you weren't enough. It wasn't because you didn't try hard enough, love deep enough, give enough. It was because you were trying to get something from the wrong people that only the right people. And ultimately, only you can give. Your worth isn't measured by how much pain you can take, how long you can stay, how much you can give. Your worth is inherent. It exists without anyone else's validation. It doesn't increase when people love you or decrease when they don't. It's constant, unchanging, unshakable. If you choose to believe it, start choosing yourself. Start small if you need to. Start with tiny acts of self-love. Small, boundaries, quiet moments of saying no to what doesn't serve you. Let these small choices build momentum. Let them show you what's possible when you finally decide that you deserve more. Here's what I know for sure. The moment you stop accepting less than you deserve is the moment your entire life begins to change. The moment you start treating yourself with the love and respect you've been seeking from others is the moment everything shifts. You are not broken. You don't need fixing. You need remembering. Remembering who you were before the world told you that you weren't enough. Remembering your inherent worth. Remembering that you deserve love. That feels like coming home, not like going to. The people who hurt us were our greatest teachers. They taught us what we don't want, what we won't accept, what we deserve instead. But now it's time for new teachers. It's time for joy to teach you about happiness, for peace to teach you about love, for self-respect to teach you about boundaries. Your story isn't over. This pattern of choosing people who hurt you, it's just one chapter, and you get to write the next one. You get to choose how this story continues. You get to decide what love looks like from now on. So choose wisely. Choose yourself. Choose peace. Choose joy. Choose love that feels like freedom, not chains. Choose relationships that feel like growing, not shrinking. Choose connections that feel like dancing, not drowning. Because you deserve nothing less than love that makes you feel more yourself, not less. Love that helps you expand, not contract. Love that feels like flying, not falling. And that kind of love starts with you.